Hi friends, it's Sarah from rufflesandrainbows.com. Today we're going to be cutting white acrylic, with a diode laser, and we're going to be talking about whether we should mask or not mask our acrylic when we are working with small shapes. So I'm going to show you the ins, outs, goods, bads, and everything for this. Starting in XCS, I write my goal, and that is to work with 3015 glossy white acrylic from CMB. I'm using 1/8 of an inch. Now I'm going to create a basic shape for this ornament, 3 1/4 inches big. And here's the thing, you're not going to want to use these cuts and settings for anything like a very, very small script font, but it works for this. We're going to create a 0.25 inch circle, and we're going to make sure that that's at least the same diameter or distance away from the edge. So I'm just going to pop in a rectangle here, make sure I can just kind of get an eyeball here. It's 2, so we're good. So I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to center both of these, and then I'm going to unite, subtract, or combine, subtract to make that a whole for our ornament hanger. I'm going to bring in an SVG I created. This is XOXO y'all with some small hearts. And I'm going to turn off any layer that I don't want, which is all the stitching and text, other than this XO and some hearts. So I'm going to just size it to get an idea of how big I want it to be. And these are cuts. We can put them all on the same layer. So you can see here, I think it's going to look really cute. You can type this in whatever fonts you like. You don't have to use my SVG, but I'll put that link down below. So I'm going to tighten up these little placements here so I can make everything a little bit bigger. So I'm going to distribute them horizontally and align them at the bottom before I unite just this XOXO. Then I'm just going to center that XO against the heart. I didn't like it, so I moved it over one. Now, for these little hearts, I can actually unite each of these individuals into one, copy, paste, and reflect it horizontally so I can have a little repeat up here at the top. And that basically is our design. Again, you can type the XO and insert hearts from XCS if you want. Now is the fun part, or I think it's the fun part. We're going to kind of clean up our form here. We don't need any of the black, so let's just delete that entirely. I'm going to put all of the XOXO and the 2 heart layers. Those can all be grouped together, or you can just put them on a different layer. We are going to indicate cut. But we are going to indicate ignore because we're not going to do that first. We're focusing on this heart. This is going to be out of white 3015 glossy acrylic in 1/8 of an inch. So for those of you who aren't listening and are just watching because you're trying to avoid being caught at work, I get it. We're going to remove the masking from the front and the back of the white acrylic. We're going to elevate the acrylic off our bed, and we're going to try 93 and 3. So 90 power, 3 speed, and 3 passes. Now, I'm going to tell you that there will be a little bit of a chunky piece when it starts and stops. I have no idea other than additional passes how to remove it, so I'm going to file it down and show you what I use. Don't look at my really, really dirty bed, but I'm just going to use some quarters. You can use extra pieces of wood or standoffs, whatever you have. Just going to remove that masking. Remember, we remove it from the front and the back, and then we're just going to pop this onto those quarters or raised pieces. Just make sure you're not lasering over anything. While you can over laser wood, you could get some flare-ups in the back, and honestly, I've had some where I couldn't clean it off. So just kind of avoid those little elevated pieces up if you can. I'm using the X-Tool provided magnetic pins to just make sure my acrylic doesn't bounce when I push on it. We're going to be focusing in this area over here. So I'm going to go ahead and set my settings to 93 and 3. And again, this is not going to be perfect. I will show you why. But we are going to avoid some issues. So we're going to put our crosshairs over the acrylic, hit auto distance, and what happens in the machine is it's going to throw out the little switchblade positioning system, and it's going to reset over on the table and enter our distance. Next up, we're going to mark our area. I chose rectangle, and you're going to position your crosshairs at the upper leftmost starting point, hit the start button on the machine. Locks in this first vertex here, that red dot. You move the crosshairs, push the start button on the machine, and now we have a nice little square-ish shape. When we zoom out, you can see the squarish shape, so I'm just going to highlight this, move it over, and then now we have it on our board. I'm going to make one change to my auto air assist, and that is to reduce the amount of power on that to 2, so I can still reduce charring, but I won't have it sprayed all over everywhere. All right, so now I'm just going to make sure everything on layer 1 is ignored, or this layer here is ignored. I'm going to just move this one to blue so you can see the difference. We're only cutting blue right now. So again, have my settings, going to go ahead and frame it. And when I hit framing, what happens when I hit the start button is it's just going to map out exactly how big our heart is going to be on our acrylic. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and open my blast gate, turn on my inline fan, and I'm going to hit start in the machine, or on the software first and then on the machine. That sends the file and communicates that we are going to watch this go 3 times around. It took 4.5 minutes. So I'm going to show you right when it comes out of the machine here. It is not perfect. One side is always going to be nice and smooth, and you can see this other down here. Let me get a little dark piece. You can see it's kind of chunky on this edge. You can see that a little bit. I'll show you. If I flip it over, you can see that right on the edge. You can also see the start and stop position of the laser. And what that looks like, let me get a little stick. Where's my little stick? So what that looks like is right here. You see that little edge here? And it's going to mirror itself right at the top when it did the outside. I'm going to use a nail file for this, and I just get them on Amazon in bulk, and I'm going to file down the edge of this heart, and I'll show you how I get, a little bit of cleanup in a minute. So now that we have the acrylic heart, we're going to move to our little heart pieces and the XOXO. Remember, we can ungroup, we can't ununite, which is why we just grouped all these 3 pieces, because now I'm going to move them because we don't need them on the heart, and we're going to position them onto our acrylic. So I'm going to select all of these just to make sure I look at my sizing to make sure I have the width and height over on my acrylic. I'm setting 104:2, but I'm worried about these little tiny hearts. I'm going to do this 2 ways to test. I have 3M adhesive backing on that back piece. I'm going to measure, I'm going to mark, I'm going to do all of this like normal, like we just did, and I'm going to run this at 104:2, but I'm so worried about those little small pieces that I actually go back to my original test for this acrylic. I keep all of my test pieces for this acrylic, or for everything actually. And the reason I do that is because you can see in here for this matte coral, I tested it but chose the 2 pass as the winner. So if I come here, the first one is 1 pass, the second is 2 passes. I'm going to go ahead and try that 1 pass because it did cut cleanly. But I just want to show you the reason we keep these is because you can really get a nice visual. So I'm going to change that to 1, let the machine run with the masking on the front and the 3M on the back. I don't recommend any core colors. Look how tiny this heart is. I don't recommend any light core colors to be masked. This is better because it doesn't burn that masking adhesive, but we still do have the start and stop points of the laser that we can just clean up again with a nail file or some sandpaper. And my winner is always going to be light acrylic, light core is going to be unmasked. Look how tiny these are. I have a 1 little divot too, but you can see even on the tiny pieces, that start and stop is very prevalent. All right, so now I'm just going to clean my acrylic. Do I have acrylic cleaner? Yeah, I don't know where it is. So I'm just going to use some Dawn dish soap and a paper towel. It didn't scratch it, but I had a little tiny bit of char. Again, we dropped it down to 2 to try and avoid that, but had a little bit, so I had to clean it up. Now, for those 2 little pieces that we had, right, remember we have the little start-stop piece, and we have a little bit of a rough edge on one side. I'm just going to use my nail file for that. Now to get the inside hole here, I'm just going to roll up a little piece of sandpaper and just a couple passes with that. It does not take a lot of force, so please be gentle. This is only 1/8 acrylic. It's not really hard stuff, so it's really easy to make a nice clean edge. So I'm using the double-sided sticky mat from X Tool. You can use your Cricut one, or you can use a piece of blue painter's tape. Just make sure you can position this thing so where the heart doesn't move when you're popping these on. So I'm going to show you both sides of these pieces of acrylic of that matte coral that I cut. And the reason is because I think it makes such a difference in the final project. But ultimately, we just line them up. I'm using that line across. I remove the masking on the front, remove the 3M adhesive backing, and I just pop them down, following that line. Yes, that stuck to my finger. I don't even notice yet. I noticed right there, I think. All right, so now we're just going to repeat that. I'm not going to make you watch it. I had to lean over this a bit. Okay, so now that that's on, we just pop on our little hearts and we add a string, because I totally forgot that my machine was actually cutting that second run right then. And we just thread this through. I also added a little bit of tape at the top to thread on some small wood beads, because I have, I don't know, probably 1.5 million of them in my craft room. And so once that was done, I just tie up the bit at the top, and then I just repeat the entire thing on the other side. I get the mat back out and just pop this all back down. I don't know why I showed you how slow that was to knot that. But that was real time. You can see this side looks great from far away, but when you put the unmasked versus the masked, so this is the unmasked and this is the masked. You see all that burnt in adhesive? Could you file it down? Yes. Unmasked is on the right for this one. I just really like the unmasked look. I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know down in the comments if you'll give white acrylic a try.